I want to talk about human will. I want to talk about how we are responsible for our own ascension, and the fact that there is a story about the different waves of the indigo children and the crystal children and the golden ones, and it's so insulting to God, to the fact that we are all created with this potential, and nothing has changed from the side of the divine. Nothing has meant that the younger generations are better off in a soul capacity. The capacity is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. Circumstances and situations have changed because of how previous generations have used their will. And it's been so messy, and they've made a lot of mistakes. But little by little, there is this wiggle room where the new generations can do things like really develop a sense of faith in the goodness of the universe, in the fact that it's all based on the principle of love. This is the bastardization has come from the really wayward and confused use of human will, and that won't change unless the will is enacted by each individual to move in that direction. Maybe I'm sounding harsh here, but this is a message for myself, because as much as we can tell ourselves a story and kind of think there's this thing of sit back and let the flow take us, that's only a half of it. That's only a part of it, because so much has to be in conjunction with our own very, very honed and specific will to grow and to change and to embody all these high ideals in your day-to-day life, in the mundane, in the decisions and the choices that we make with every single breath. You know, the quality of your breath is the quality of your life, and every breath you take is a decision and is a choice. And to get so heady and so complicated with the thinking about it and thinking about what's right and wrong, instead of just it's strange that the ways these concepts can then get manipulated in terms of things like going with the flow. Like, go with the flow in the sense that don't resist what is presented. Everything that's presented is there to show you something, to help you move forward, to help you hone your will and to fine-tune your desires. And every time we blame the situation around us, the circumstances, then we're not taking responsibility and we're not in the flow. And many times we like to think go with the flow means go with the easiest thing. Like, if it feels bad, like, reject it completely and don't address it. And that's not it. Going with the flow also means acting with will, using your will to make a different choice. And many times we're so scared of making a mistake and so scared of saying the wrong thing and not being in alignment, we end up trying to live this very perfect small life instead of expanding by making mistakes that are new all the time. New mistakes. The worst thing is when we make same mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making a mistake and making an error, but when it's the same one over and over and over again, then that's an indication from the universe that we are we're not progressed in that area, even if we say we are, even if we say we know the reasons. You can think and know the reasons intellectually why you keep doing something over and over again, but until you really grab the bull by the horns and feel it emotionally and feel why you keep going back to that behavior that is, is not helpful. And a lot of that will necessarily, it's masking something, emotional block from childhood. And it's also a fear of the unknown, because it's like, okay, I make this mistake over and over again, but at least it's familiar, at least I suffer the consequences, but it's consequences that I understand. And this is the thing with human dis-ease. People like being in disease, in diseased states, because it's so familiar and habitualized, and it's tragic when we don't take the plunge and make something that could potentially be a different new mistake. Then we feel like we're protecting ourselves, but we don't know what the result of that, because as well we're making the assumption that anything different will be a mistake. We have no idea that it could lead you to the job of your life and the state of being that you're desperately passionate to get towards, without knowing. There's this thing of faith and action, and you have the faith that something is possible, but you don't want to take the action to actually reach for those stars, because you're afraid of failure, because failure is not allowed. You're afraid of the consequences, because they could be uncomfortable and new for your skin, new sensations. And many times I find myself now in rooms and in spaces that I don't recognize, and the pain and the suffering comes because I'm trying to fill that space with something that came from a different room, and it's the wrong furniture, and I'm trying to Tetris things in that do not fit, because I'm trying to use my old conditioning to address the new thing in front of me. And this is very heightened for me, being in a new culture and learning a new language and trying to assimilate English idioms into Spanish sentence structures, and it doesn't work. And that is much as life is in terms of energetically. When we come to a new relationship, we bring all of our baggage from before, all of our conditioning of all the relationships we've seen, normally from our parents, and we superimpose it without realizing. And one thing about the 7-year itch and all these things of relationships, when they go on for a certain amount of time, normally that's the point where we are just exhausted of keeping up our facade for so long with this person, and then the conditioning just springs back in. We don't care about trying to keep them around anymore, so we just let it all out on them. And normally that's when we start hating the partner that we're with, because they're not helping us uphold our ego to such a level as well, because they're tired, because it's so tiring to have a image of yourself that you're trying to keep together and keep sort of sticky taped together and make sure everybody else is agreeing with you about that image. So the relationship breaks down, or they have a baby or get married or do something, rather than confronting the underlying conditions, which are, a lot of people hate the thing, oh, I'm turning into my mother. And it's like, yes, because you've never addressed those issues. One thing for me is I am incredibly passive aggressive in relationships, and I hadn't realized this to the extent, or at least I'd even seen it, thought, oh, I've seen that, I won't be like that anymore. And now I see it in my day-to-day life, coming out exactly as my mother. And it's like, wow, I had no inkling that I was so carrying that in such an identical way, identical facial expressions, and it's just like a cloak you put on to kind of, it's like the two egos, from the perfected one and then the automaton that just comes in at that moment when it's feeling so exhausted from trying to hold on to this good thing. And it was funny as well. I've been poked by Richie to try and get to the core of the emotion, and I've been like flailing about in the mundane everyday activities, just breaking things, leaving taps on, leaving a lot of things undone that then sowing seeds of disharmony, which later create problems, and then feeling, oh, I don't know, and it's that ignorance. And in the past, there's always that thing of, what am I like? Or that feeding an underlying feeling of, I'm just terrible. And in the past, many times I've had someone there to bolster me, bolster. And Richie doesn't do that. He addresses the thing that's happened directly and doesn't then say, oh, but it's okay, it's fine. He's like, oh, you've done this. And then lets me sit with that. And that makes me, because we're not at 7 years yet, but on day one, he was triggering all my ego stuff. But it brings up all these things, and I see myself coming up with a lot of different excuses and reasons why I didn't do something, or the reasons why, or just trying to create a list of, yeah, okay, I didn't do those 5 things, but I did these 5 things. He's like, yeah, but you didn't do those 5 things. And he just keeps pointing me back to the negative pile of crap. It's like you clean 75% of the floor and leave 25%, and then say, yeah, that's enough. And they say, yeah, but can you clean the 25%? Yeah, but I've done that. Yeah, but can you do that? No, but I've done that. Yeah, but can you do that? And it's this back and forth, which is so draining, emotionally and energetically. And yesterday, I just allowed the words, like the childish words, to bubble up, which is like, I just want you to tell me that I'm good. Then I can do everything on your list. Then I can be, because I was not having any bolstering or acceptance of my flaws for me to then have this huge motivation to be better and think I could be better. Instead of just, like, I'm identifying with the ability to sweep the floor. I have evidence that I can clean 75%. So the fact I'm not doing 25%, there's a reason for that. But I'm getting caught up in just justifying. And that is why the 25% doesn't get done. Because my brain stops, and I've seen myself physically stop moving and go thinking. Instead of action. I'm not a cleaner. I'm not a teacher. I am not an action. I'm me, inherently loved, inherently beautiful, inherently capable of doing anything that I want times a million, with incredible speed and diligence and coordination and all these amazing things that every single human has the capacity for. But I'm choosing to be less than, and then try to dress myself up as more than. So it's when I say it like this, it's so abundantly clear that I'm just identifying with the lack, identifying with the lesser processes. And that is a drain on the mind, it's a drain on the time. It means that there's so much processing that needs to be done. And the processing time can be dialed right down by just doing the things. But there's a need in me yesterday. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm a good girl. And then I'll believe you. And he's like, but I can't tell you that until you give me the proof. Like, what? I can't lie to you. You can't do this, fake it till you make it. Like, you could, it doesn't make any sense in this respect, in terms of progressing. It's not okay to think myself into something I mean, maybe it will benefit me to think, yes, I'm capable, and then do it. Like many times, to think the positive thinking really does have a good effect. If at the same time I'm also sweeping, I can sweep, I can sweep, I can sweep. Not sitting there watching YouTube thinking, yeah, I can sweep. Because you can tell that's going to create a huge disparity in the mind, because you're lying to yourself. That's the exhaustion of lies. That is what is so tiring. That's why so many people are so exhausted all the time, because we're lying to ourselves daily. And then the upkeep, the maintenance of that is more than maintaining the cleanliness of a caravan. It's so funny. Always the physical things, the physical strength, the body, the external world, that's infinitely easier to address than breaking the mental habits, the patterns that go round and around and around. But unfortunately, the external then suffers as a result of this mental fluff happening. There's nothing tangible about this, everything going on up here. It's vapor. But it becomes tangible when you then overthink things, you know, like you have maybe 6 or 7 USBs and there's one particular one that you need, and you put it in a very safe place and you've thought about it very much. Now I have no idea where that safe place is, and it's the only one that I need, and that's come from a thing of overthinking. There's this ironing sensation all this year, this under intense heat, just being smooth and being finessed. And that's only because of the external environment becoming more godlike every day. And becoming more godlike is more truthful, more honest, and that means maybe it looks shit, and maybe it feels shitter than it was. Because, for example, if you're taking drugs all the time, things feel fantastic, and then you stop taking drugs, and you're actually you're much closer towards God and towards love, but you feel like absolute crap. And that's what's happening around the world now. Like, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, and it looks a lot worse before it looks better. And it is possible to look at yourself objectively, really objectively. What was I doing with my breath? What was I doing with my posture? What was I doing with my time? And if you take out the my and you just say what happened to the body at that moment. I like to think as well that we are an amalgamation of different things. We're a living organism. There's a Emma soul thing floating within this, but this is essentially made of carbon, made of the food that I've been eating over the years, formed by the environment. Gravity and the forces acting upon this body has compressed it into this shape, and then the exercise within and the motion and the movements and what I've allowed to grow and not grow has formed this vessel. But there's not an I. This is made up of millions of different bacteria, millions of different molecules, millions of different atoms, and billions, trillions of different elements all working together. And I think it's very selfish, self-centered to say I, me, Emma, and me and my choices. And because every time I make a choice, it's a domino effect, and I'm sending signals to all these different members of the community, of the army that is within this physical vessel, and all of these wires and neural pathways in the brain. I'm sending these messages back and forth. And I say that's me who's not able to sweep 25%. Well, if I got my army in order, if I got my community functioning and working well in the way that God intended and the way it is designed, then there's nothing inhibiting that. Nothing. The only person inhibiting it is this very funny control person sitting somewhere up here with the little levers and the cogs making the decisions. And it's not, I might say, oh, I've maybe when I was young I put all of my faith in a man and in men because I can't meet my own needs, but I know if I cuddle up to this person over here, they've got more power than me, and then I can get what I need. Maybe I did that, and I handed my will over, but I used my will to hand my will over. That's the secret of the victim mentality that we should all realise. Those of us who have chosen, because you choose when you're young, you choose the victim, you choose the aggressor. And I noticed myself as well yesterday in a shop, and I've not been around many people, but I noticed somebody smaller than me, a younger girl. I noticed there was a desire in me to be the alpha and to be more of the aggressor. And I see that, and it's to do with the protoplasm, moving towards, moving away from, and I literally just felt myself, my energetic form was imposing upon her, whereas many times I feel myself shrinking like this. So it's really something that we then have more control over than we realise, far more. But there's this whole thing that, you know, God has just sent new people along that are much more advanced and able, and no, it's the state that we're in at the moment that makes certain things more capable. But at the same time, in the past, people had more faith, and now there's more will to satisfy immediate desires, and there's infinitely more things to distract ourselves with. So it's hanging in the balance between whether we spiritually evolve or devolve. But it's this yo-yoing of duality that is meaningless. And there's nothing different about the human soul. No. It's just as beautiful as when it was created. This isn't Microsoft or Apple. This isn't an upgrade. This isn't a new software version of us. No. We're just as capable or incapable as we've always been. But as more and more people are using their will and choosing to be open to love and choosing to grow and develop in love and to be much more self-aware and self-discerning, then the rest of the planet has more of a chance. So yes, the new generations have more of a platform to work on. You know, and you look at something like the 1960s, huge rebellion against the oppression of the sex, but then it becomes, I'm going to sleep with all my friends and all everyone. I'm just going to have sex with absolutely everyone, and that's fine and that's healthy. And it wasn't. It's really not healthy. It's far too confusing, and it doesn't deal with the fact that we're not evolved enough emotionally, that we're not pouring shit into one another's bodies, and just using sex as a total distraction just to meet with a person that has corresponding injuries, and for that moment it feels like a jigsaw piece has been met, that need has been fulfilled. But again, it's just addictions. It's not standing in both of our own power, feeling my emotions whilst you feel your emotions, and we do that together. That wasn't really what was kicking off in the 60s. It was much more hedonistic. But again, you know, all part of the process, because we had to break down that oppression that said sex was bad, because it's definitely not. Had to break down that taboo. But there was nothing stopping a human being, even in the midst of all that oppression, finding their own true sexuality, and there were so many that did. And there was nothing to stop people in the 1960s being connected to sexuality whilst also just having love for that one person. And you know, there was never anything inhibiting that. But in terms of the external environment making something more conducive, those two platforms had to kind of come, and now we're coming into something of a balanced state with regards to sexuality, just as one example of an issue. Oh, there's just so much that had to come out. Ah. And little by little, I'm going to start making astrological summaries based around what is actually happening as we move into the new decade. And because I feel like this year, this rat year, was so much foundational stuff. And there's the thing, you know, like the necessity that then means that humans can use their will. It takes a virus for us to utilize a lot of these skills that we always had within us. We always had the capacity to create many of the beautiful things that have been created since the world became online. But the necessity has pushed it forward because of human will, human desire. And this is the thing about the economics. Economic system is about desire, is about human desire and how we use it, how we feel towards something. We collectively use our will to desire something, whether that is something like everybody wants the same handbag, and then suddenly these handbags are on the market. Everybody needs a mask, and suddenly there are pop-up shops selling masks everywhere. You know? But when we can make our desire more for God and more for spiritual things and more for self-knowledge and more for expansion, like we are just scratching the surface of love. The potential for love is enormous. But the potential for sin and for degradation of the soul is pretty finite. There's not really, no one's inventing any new sin. No one's inventing new ways to sin. It's like sex, drugs, rock and roll, lying to yourself, lying to other people, you know, just being fake, being false, being egomaniac. You know, that's all been going on since Nero. It's just different flavors, different speeds. Now you can get, you know, pornography like that, and it's the same thing though. It's the same. It's not getting any. It's not expanding into new realms. Whereas with love is this. Like, when I say scratch the surface, I mean like we have flaked off less than 1% of human potential for love, let alone the universe's potential for love. But in terms of where we're at now, like, we're just... But how great to be in the infancy, how great to be in nursery with all of this ahead of us. We're just in the playground now. We don't have to have everything sorted now. We don't have to have everything resolved. But we do need to accept the fact that there's a hell of a lot of work to do. So much to move into. But that's amazing. That's a really, really, really good thing.